The sky above the East China Sea was not blue. It was gray, not from clouds, from exhaust. The air vibrated with a sound that felt more like an earthquake than an engine. 400 American aircraft were blotting out the sun. Below them sat the greatest beast of steel ever forged by human hands. It was the pride of an empire. It was unsinkable. And in less than 2 hours, it would vanish from the face of the earth. If you want to see more stories where history feels like a movie, just hit that subscribe button. It helps us keep these memories alive. It was April 7th, 1945. The Pacific War had reached the doorstep of Japan. The Americans had landed on Okinawa. The desperate plan was Operation 10 Go. It was a suicide mission. There was no air cover. There was no fuel for a return trip. The mission was simple. Beach the massive battleship on the coast of Okinawa and use it as an unsinkable artillery fortress until it was destroyed. Ensign Mitsuru Yoshida stood on the bridge. He was a radar officer. He was young, barely out of university. He gripped the railing. The metal was cold and damp with sea spray. The ship beneath him, the Yamato, felt immortal. It was over 800 feet long. It displaced 72,000 tons. Its guns could fire a shell the weight of a car over 26 miles. But looking at the radar screen, Yoshida felt small. He wrote in his diary later that morning, "The weather is clear. The waves are high. We are sailing into a place where death is the only certainty." The air smelled of heavy fuel oil and salt. The vibration of the massive turbines hummed through the soles of Yoshida's boots. The crew was silent. 3,000 men stood at battle stations. They looked at the horizon. The clouds were low. The sea was dark. Suddenly, the voice from the lookout shattered the silence. "Formation at 2 o'clock. Number? Cannot count." Hundreds. The first twist came from the clouds. It wasn't a fair fight. It wasn't a duel. It was an execution. The American planes didn't come in a line. They came like a swarm of angry wasps, helldivers, avengers, hellcats. They dove from every angle at once. The Yamato's main guns, the largest ever built, roared. They fired special anti-aircraft shells called the Beehive. They filled the sky with molten steel and fire, but the planes were too fast. Yoshida watched the first bomb hit. It struck the aft deck. The steel groaned. It sounded like a church bell ringing underwater. Smoke poured into the ventilation shafts. He noted, "It was not a battle. It was a storm of iron. We were just leaves waiting to fall." Yoshida ran to the starboard lookout. The ship was already listing. The Americans were smart. They focused on one side. If they hit both sides, the ship would just sink lower but stay level. If they hit only the port side, the ship would capsize. Torpedoes streaked through the water, white trails of death on the dark blue ocean. He saw a young sailor near the anti-aircraft mount. The boy was freezing. His hands were locked on the trigger. "Go below. Fire control is out." "No, sir. I have targets." The second wave hit harder. The Americans were relentless. They coordinated their attacks perfectly. One group bombed the deck to suppress the gunners. While the gunners took cover, the torpedo bombers dropped their payloads low against the water. The Yamato shuddered violently. A torpedo slammed into the port side amidships. The water rushed in. It wasn't a leak. It was a river. The damage control teams were screaming into their headsets. They had to flood the starboard engine and boiler rooms to balance the ship. It was a terrible choice. To save the ship, they had to drown their own crewmates trapped in those compartments. The listing worsened. The floor tilted 15 degrees. Walking became climbing. Equipment slid across the bridge. Maps, binoculars, men. Yoshida looked at the captain. The man was calm. He was tied to his command post, literally. He had bound himself to the compass so he would not fall as the ship rolled. "Counter-flood starboard outer tanks," the captain said. "Already done, sir. It's not enough." Then came the realization. The moment the soul of the ship broke. The radio room reported that the escort light cruiser Yahagi was sinking. The destroyers were burning. They were alone. The greatest battleship in history was nothing more than a giant target. The 18-inch guns, capable of sinking a fleet, were useless against the agile planes buzzing around the bridge. The third wave arrived at 14 Hauku hours. This was the killing blow. Yoshida watched the torpedoes hit, 3 in rapid succession. All on the port side, the ship groaned. It was a sound like a dying animal. The rivets popped, the steel plates sheared. The list hit 30 degrees. He tried to climb the ladder to the upper deck. The angle was impossible. He was crawling on the walls. The noise was deafening. Explosions, screaming steam, the roar of water. He saw a friend clinging to a stanchion. "It's over, isn't it? Jump while you can." The action was chaotic. The deck was slick with oil and blood. Men were sliding into the sea. The anti-aircraft guns were silent now. They pointed at the sky at crazy angles. The ocean was rising up to meet them. The massive flag of the rising sun, usually flying high, was dipping into the waves. Yoshida scrambled over the side. The ship was rolling over. The hull, painted red at the bottom, rose out of the water like the back of a whale. He hit the water. It was cold. It tasted of oil. He swam hard. He knew what happened when a ship this big went down. The suction would drag everything down with it. He kicked away. His lungs burned. Behind him, the water boiled. He stopped and turned back. The Yamato was gone. In its place was a column of fire. The magazines had detonated. A mushroom cloud, 4 miles high, rose into the gray sky. It looked like an atomic bomb. The blast wave hit him in the water, compressing his chest. "I looked back," he wrote, "and saw only a pillar of fire. The sea was empty." The silence that followed was heavy. The planes turned back to their carriers. The drone of engines faded. All that was left were patches of oil and debris. Heads bobbed in the black slime. Voices called out for mothers. For water, for an end to the pain. Yoshida floated there for hours. He clung to a piece of wood. He watched the sun begin to set. The darkness hid the horror of the water. "Lord," he whispered, "let me remember this." And he did. By nightfall, the rescue destroyers arrived. Out of the crew of 3,332 men, only 269 survived. Ensign Yoshida was one of them. He was pulled from the oil, shivering, his eyes burning. According to the official U.S. Navy report, the Yamato took at least 11 torpedoes and 6 heavy bombs. It took the concentrated power of an entire task force to bring her down. It was the definitive end of the battleship era. The age of the aircraft carrier had arrived. Historians confirmed that the Yamato never fired its main guns at an enemy ship. The greatest cannons ever built fired only at the sky in a desperate attempt to swat away flies. The wreckage lies there today. It is split in 2, resting at the bottom of the East China Sea. A tomb of steel. War creates legends of invincibility. It builds giants. But on that gray day in April, the world learned a harsh lesson. Even giants bleed. And when they fall, they make the biggest waves.